Hey y'all, it's July the 8th, 2017, and recently, I met a pretty wise man from the woods of Tasmania, or at least that's where he resides currently. I met a pretty wise man, and we've been having a back and forth here and there. Um, I want to go ahead and make a response video to one of his videos. And of course, I left a link below to his video. And before you go off and see his video, I want to explain very, very profound conclusions and solutions is this man coming to. This man named Mark from Tasmania. His video further details what I'll explain briefly is that your soul feels pain because it's connected to your body, your physical self. Alright, your soul empathizes with the pain that your body feels. You understand? Like, just for instance, if you get hurt on the knee, you're actually feeling the pain in your brain, and that's interesting because the pain originates on the knee. Alright, so just to be real brief, the drugs he's describing, pharmaceutical painkillers, SSRIs, what they effectively do is they cut off the connection between the soul and the brain, or not the soul and the brain, but the soul and the rest of the body. Alright, that's in effect what they do. So therefore you'll notice that a lot of these people, they can't feel pain so good, they're kind of numbed, even and especially to physical pain. They don't really hardly feel it anymore, and the reason is because they're being disconnected from their own bodies. Alright, the soul and the body is being disconnected. This is what those pharmaceutical drugs been doing, and a lot of people have been noticing, especially as of late, that there's dire consequences when it comes to that sort of a thing. Lots of times people take these pills and it disconnects their soul from their body to a degree, but they don't wind up killing other people or killing themselves. However, there is a large percentage of people who do, and the reason is because it becomes very trivial to the soul at a certain point what happens to the body. Alright, because it doesn't even feel it, there's no connection, and so therefore lots of times you have a situation where people on these pharmaceuticals, these SSRIs, these painkillers and stuff, these people will kill themselves. They don't really feel it. In fact, lots of times in kind of bizarre ways, like for example, hanging yourself is actually a very difficult thing to do. Most people who aren't just blown away on drugs, most people can't pull that off. They'll do something else in order to commit suicide. Hanging it's extremely difficult. You have to understand to do it to yourself, and therefore you gotta understand with the more and more hangings we're hearing about, either A, it wasn't a hanging and it was just meant to look like it. Maybe it was a homicide covered up, which would probably be rare, or B, these people are gone off these pharmaceutical drugs, maybe perhaps even street drugs. They're gone off it. Their soul's completely disconnected from their body, and they wind up doing very bizarre things, especially when they're alone. They get to being alone, and I think we would all be amazed to see the kind of behavior that these people start exhibiting. To be able to hang yourself is actually very difficult. It must look like, and I've seen it before, very bizarre. It's bizarre to have that happen. Not only that, but in the video what I'm describing from this guy named Maitre Mark, from over there in Tasmania, he also describes that, if your soul is feeling empathy for your own body, they're two separate entities. The soul's feeling empathy for the pain in your body. It's reasonable to believe, and it would be pretty logical to think that your soul can feel other people's pain. That's what we usually refer to as empathy. When you have empathy for another person, you gotta understand your soul really can feel that. Your soul really can feel that pain from another person, all Green Mile and everything like that. Your soul is capable of doing that. It's very capable of doing that. People don't understand. When you think about just how capable your soul is to feeling other people's pain, you start to negate the difference between yourself and other people. Because either way, you're going to feel the pain. You understand? So that's why I want to explain drugs. I want to go and I want to dive deeper into this subject, because like we've said before, we've all come to the realization at this point, or some of us are still wrestling with it, but everything is drugs, right? And it's very important that we have that out in the open and that we think about that, because see, typically it's these painkillers that have people losing connection between their soul and their body, their soul and other people's bodies. Typically is when those painkillers and those pills that are given to you by doctors, typically that's when people start killing themselves and killing other people, because their soul can't feel the pain no more. But just to add on to that, I think it's important to suggest that seeing as everything is drugs, this applies to everything. Now let me break down to you what it is I mean by that. There's all sort of things on earth that you've experienced, that I've experienced, that made us feel good. There's all sort of different objects and things like that that bring us what they call joy and happiness and stuff. All sort of things, to include these painkillers some people find enjoyable. All right. Drugs applies to everything. Everything that brings you joy, everything on the earth can be used as a drug. And inevitably, when you get too much of anything in the world, it's going to prove to be very detrimental. And so therefore everything is drugs. And when I say that, I mean absolutely everything. One of the perfect examples, the most perfect example, is children. Because a lot of parents out there really are righteous, and they really do care about their children, and they really do want the most shining future for their children out there. A lot of people out there, they'll use their kids as a drug. They haven't been taught that their kids are a drug, but kids do the exact same thing to you. They bring you a temporary joy. When they're around, you feel really good. Right? There's a peace that comes about you, and it is chemical in nature, and all sort of it's spiritual in nature. Your soul can feel their love, and you gain pleasure from that. All right? They are drugs. Meanwhile, you could take anything overboard. You could take your children overboard, for example. Like, you could care so much about your children. You could be so involved with your children that you, for example, might lose your husband, all right, because your husband become like just disinterested at that point, because you're so involved with the children and you don't pay any attention to him, or vice versa. You could love your children so much that you don't pay any attention to your wife, right? And then meanwhile she'll lose interest and the marriage will break apart. All right, this is a perfect example, because you might have so much love for your children, so much love that your marriage breaks apart, and guess what? That's bad for your children. You see how nothing will give you permanent fulfillment on earth. Nothing is so righteous and virtuous here that you could worship it instead of worshiping God. Alright, and that's the part where everybody is going to jump off this boat. A lot of people are. Some people are still here with me. See, everything except God is drugs. I have to explain. We already explained how children can go wrong. It applies to any and every situation. No matter what it is you use to make you feel happy, no matter what it is you use, it is not God, and it will give you temporary fulfillment, and then after that temporary fulfillment is gone, guess what? You're in despair, right? You have to, it has to be God. He has to be number one. He has to be at the tip top, right? And the reason is because you can never dive too far into God, right? Once you dive far enough into God, you'll realize that everything else will fall into place. You'll be absolutely righteous. You might have a wife or a husband and stuff. You might have all sort of children and all sort of great-grandchildren and all sort of things like that. You might understand that you will start to be more prosperous. You'll start to be more at peace. You'll start to sleep better at night. You'll start to have way better health. Just everything will come together if you use God for fulfillment, and you can't use anything else. Not anything, not the Bible, not anything else. You use Jesus because Jesus is the Son of God. You understand? That's why he said he's the only way. Gotta use him, because the problem is you can't use anything else. You can use something else, and people use a lot of different things, but if you're using something other than the truth, if you're using something other than the life, the way, anything, it doesn't matter if it's video games or roller skates or whatever you do. Maybe you like ice cream a whole bunch. All right, none of that matters. That's all drugs. It's all drugs because it'll make you feel good temporarily, and then that will wear off. The only thing that doesn't wear off, believe it or not, is the creator of all these things that you find to be so good and delightful, and so do I. I like to partake in all sort of things, and everything is drugs. All right, it's very important to note that, and to note that your soul is being disconnected from your body when these painkillers take effect, and this is why people will be hanging themselves and committing all sort of suicide in heinous ways, and they'll also be killing other people who do not deserve to be killed. They'll just go off and kill people. Their soul's disconnected from everything, right? And it is pretty important to note that everything is drugs, all right? Nothing will get you through. I mean, that's the thing about it. Like I said, the soul is connected to your body. You feel your pain, but also the soul is connected to everybody else's bodies, and it feels their pain to some extent. And I'll finish on this. We all do drugs, all right? We all partake in drugs because it makes us feel good. You understand? Our drugs make us feel good for the moment, and while we have those good feelings, we can stand to do something productive. We could stand to serve God. We could stand to, if we don't want to, if we're scared to say the word God, we could stand to serve righteousness. We could stand to serve justice. We could stand to serve truth and liberty and freedom and all that kind of good stuff, that American stuff. We can stand to do that, all right, if we do enough drugs to get us through the day. We all do drugs because everything is drugs, all right? But at the same time, if you let those drugs take over you, and this applies to anything in the world, if you let those drugs take over you, what they do is they cut off your soul from the body of others. Your soul still feels your pain, kind of, for the most part, but your soul will stop feeling the empathy of others around you. And in fact, drugs is kind of good that way, because I want to explain. If we as human beings truly understood all the pain and struggle that's being had by others around us, it would be crippling. We would not be able to get out of bed. To think of all these other different countries where people are slaves and stuff, and people are getting raped and sexually trafficked as little kids. To think about all that sort of stuff, you would be crippled. You wouldn't be able to get out of bed. Understand? So this is why we need drugs. This is why we've all been misled to say, just say no to drugs. You remember that not Ronald Reagan, but his wife, hey, just say no to drugs. Guess what? Whether she knew it or not, that was a damn lie. Because everything is drugs. Right? She could have just said, just say no to pharmaceuticals. Just say no to, you know what I'm saying? She could have been more specific about it, but she said the word drugs. And what that did is it misled us. We came to believe that only certain things are drugs. No, in fact, everything is drugs. And we need those drugs to get out of bed, all right, in order to live lives that maybe perhaps could be righteous. Maybe it could be helpful and beneficial to others, all right? But some people slide down that slippery slope, and they let these things, their children, these drugs, these reefers, these everything else, anything else, everything that makes you feel good, music, everything, they'll pick one, and they might cling on to it and worship it. It might take over their whole life, even their whole mentality. it might cut off their empathy. They might be feeling so good because they're so immersed in music, or they're so immersed in the arts. Maybe they're so immersed in whatever it is they like, that what it'll do is it will relieve the empathy from one soul to the soul of other people. Right? And that's actually equally as drastic as all these murder-suicides that we see going on here, man. We need to be connected to other people. Our souls need to be connected. We need to feel empathy. We need to feel pain for other people's bodies and their souls. And drugs will effectively cut off that connection. Drugs is everything. Anyways, I'll holler at y'all. It is the Tribulations, July the 8th, 2017. And I perfectly acknowledge that many people think I'm outside of my brains. And yet and still I made the video. I'll holler at y'all.